Hey Atari Hackers, welcome to this week's podcast episode. In today's episode, I'm with Greg Elfrink from Empire Flippers, because as you guessed it, Mark is still sipping cocktails in Bali. But it's fine because Greg is a lot more funny than Mark and he knows a lot more about buying and selling websites, which is what we're going to be talking about today. My goal for today's interview is pretty simple. First, I want to understand how much money I can make in 2020 if I'm selling or exiting an authority site. I want to know both the high end and the kind of average what people make in general. The second thing I want to understand is what buyers are willing to pay premium for. So you can do these things on your website, and if you're considering exiting your business, then you can make more money from your exit. And finally, the last thing I'm trying to understand is there is a lot of new business models coming up with a lot of money being invested in buying websites from private equity and other things in the market. I want to get Greg's perspective, and I want to understand how you can take advantage of this. So without further teasing, let's jump into the interview right now. But before we do, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button below and give us a thumb up if you enjoy these kind of deep interviews. Let's get going. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Atari Hacker podcast. Before we get started with Greg, I've got to make a statement. If you don't have a business card from Greg that is going to be on the podcast today in your wallet, you're probably not an SEO, at least not an SEO that gets out of the room he does SEO in. Because if you attend any live event where Greg is, the chances are you will get a dozen of his business cards. At least, I found one on the urinal in Chiang Mai SEO when I went to the toilet. And the other day, I actually found my dog playing with one of your business cards as well, Greg. So my first question is probably the deepest question we're going to have for this whole podcast, which is how much per year do you spend on business cards?
Oh, it's economies of scale, right? So I get them fairly cheap. I like business cards, man. That's how you sell high-ticket businesses, right? I do all of that on purpose, because there's nothing more forgettable than going to a networking event and someone just handing you a business card and that's it. I've had so many random encounters now with people who have experienced this marathon of my business cards, for your dog finding it 6 months after the event. There's this other girl I went to a lot of conferences with, and I eventually got to the point where I was sneaking them in her purse and stuff. Then she just started handing them out with other people. Rafi from the Search Initiative, or one of the guys over there, he came over to my booth at last Chiang Mai SEO. He's like, "Hey man, give me some of your business cards." I gave him a stack. And he actually took them to his table to start handing them out. So it's all part of the plan.
I guess it kind of works. It's kind of like the animation around it that works. Fair enough. But in all seriousness, let's just go back to what you guys actually do. Can you just explain for those who don't know, which honestly, given the amount of stuff you guys sponsor, I'd be surprised, what you guys do at Empire Flippers? And give me an idea of how many deals you do per year, the scale of the operation, basically.
Yeah, sure. So what we do, if no one knows what Empire Flippers is, we are an M&A brokerage for online businesses. So the exact kind of businesses that you teach your students to build, that's the type of businesses we sell. We also do e-commerce and SaaS, apps, a bunch of other random esoteric ones as well. But that's what we do, and I'm the director of marketing, so I oversee the whole the marketing component. What was the second part of your question?
Just how big is Empire Flippers? How many?
Yes, the deals.
How many deals you guys do per year? That kind of stuff, just to get an idea.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a bit late here in Vietnam, so my mind is a bit melted. I was just looking at the industry report. So this is something we're starting to publish every year. The first one was last year, and I believe the number was 273 businesses in 2019. 274 in 2018 and 179 back in 2017. So we've grown a lot. And what's interesting about the 2018 to 2019 is even though we sold one less business in 2019, the actual average sales price went dramatically up. I don't have the sheet in front of me, but it's a huge percentage. It's basically from, I think it was 118,000 in 2018 as average deal size to 189,000 as average deal size. And we've sold probably pretty close to more seven-figure businesses this year than all the other years combined. So it's been good for us.
Fair enough. You guys don't just sell content sites, even though that's what we focus on here. What's the most expensive content sites that you guys sold? Do you have an idea at least? Or?
Yeah, so the biggest one we sold was I think 2 years ago. It was $1.7 million, and I've been through your core scale, and you design much more beautiful sites than this site was, so that should give you some inspiration.
Some inspiration to go to the bottom and just... Create cheap sites.
Screw all this design. I'm spending too much time on it, honestly. But yeah, 1.7 million biggest content site. That was a straight up like affiliate site, very similar to what you teach your students to build with review articles, best X for Y, all that stuff. Biggest business in general, I believe, was at Amazon FBA, and that was about 4.2 million.
Yeah, fair enough. Like, I mean, Amazon FBA is just a different beast, right? It's just like a much more cash flow intensive.
It's intense.
Like, what's the percentage of like content sites against the other types of sites that you guys sell? Like, what is the stuff you sell the most of, and what do you see like growing or going down, etc.? Like, what do people want? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so as far as what we sell in the marketplace the most is Amazon FBA nowadays. We still sell a ton of content sites, of course. That's our bread and butter. That hasn't really gone down over the years. It's just Amazon FBA has dramatically gone up. So those are the two main business models. One business model that I think you'll be seeing on our marketplace more this year is SaaS. So we just listed a $2 million SaaS business, for instance. So that's probably the area we have the most room to really grow in, since we kind of dominate the other two. It's just like, less growth opportunity there because we're so well known in those two spaces now. But FBA and content for sure, biggest ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to see how you guys evolved, because initially it was like AdSense flippers or something that it was called.
At the
time, so at the time it was like, I think the model was like, build sites that make $1 a day and have like 2,000 of them,
It was exactly the model. You would make like $50 a month, and you go sell them for 20x. So like when I first came on board with EF, everyone was like, you guys only sell things at 20x, and we were trying to like get rid of that, part of our history.
I think you should embrace it. I think it's fine. I think it just shows also how far the industry has come. Because
it's huge.
It's like if you look at the evolution, even if you go to like live events, etc., which you do a lot these days, you see that the people that used to do these kind of tiny sites as well now are like running teams of like 50 people, 100 people, whatever, running in the biggest niches, etc. I was actually catching up with my friend Kevin Espiritu. He's been on the podcast a few times here. And same thing, he's like killing it. He's like, he might even be on TV in the US and everything right now, just from his authority sites and stuff. And it's funny to see how far this industry has evolved, and I'm curious to see like how far it's going. But like, you guys were like one of the pillars that kind of like started it with the tropical MBA and all these things, etc. And I don't know. I think it's quite interesting, and it's also interesting to see how the topics are changing. So like, it's like there's still a lot of people that are interested in like, oh, how do I rank on Google? But more and more, it's more about like, oh, how do I build a team? How do I like scale this up? How do I do more of this, etc. And I think you guys are like, you guys are pushing that kind of stuff as well. So it's pretty cool. Go ahead.
I just real quick on Kevin. I follow him too, and like I've had a few conversations with him. Really cool guy, and like I think he is just at the beginning of what he can really do with that content site.
He's gonna be like the Jamie Oliver of gardening, I believe, one day.
yeah. But like the cool thing about it, like he is a great example, right? Like that site just was the site that he initially had. Was, just like anything else, like all of our SEO friends build. And all he did was decide to go a step further, which is something you and I have talked about a lot at conferences. How very few SEOs ever, take that step back to see the bigger picture of what they can build.
That's why I like him a lot, because he went past it, and I think it's working well, and I think it shows that you can actually build a real business from these things. And I think that's what you talk about when you did this like 9-figure exit type speech in China, basically.
My flyby speech, 15 minutes.
Hey,
132 million exits.
Well, that caught people's attention. One question I wanted to ask though, it's like, I want to understand how you guys value sites, because kind of like my goal with this interview is to understand like how people can get the best deal trying to exit their sites, and like understand that kind of whole process, etc. So I want to understand how you guys value sites, and maybe how this has changed in the past 12 months or so. Like a lot of things have changed in online marketing, etc. And I want to know if that impacts site valuation or not really.
Yeah, so the one of the big things, and this isn't really like a 2019 change by any means. This is a change that's been happening as the industry matures, and like I literally just saw another person bring this up in another group, and that's about the value of a brand, right? Mm-hmm. Most SEOs building these sites, they're not thinking about brand. Like Kevin, he's thinking about a brand, right? He's building a real brand. Most SEOs are building like a cash flow stream, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you have let's say you had a site like, I I don't know, just bought a DSLR, bestreddslrs.com, EMD or whatever. And that, say you got that site up to a valuation of $650,000, and there was another website that was like camerahero.com or something like that, and it was making a little bit less than that site would probably actually go for a higher value, because as you get bigger, those investors and buyers want real brands, right? They're not interested in the cash flow play, and now you're starting to see a lot more of those sites go that way, which to me, I think that's a really good thing, because that means they're focusing on things outside of just the, like how can I rank in Google for this keyword or whatever. They're building, really good content, really good stable businesses.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of was my question next, basically. Like, basically, if you take like SEO in the past, let's say year and a half versus SEO the years before that, it's so much more unstable now. I mean, we literally had an article that came out 2 days ago that said Forbes lost 90% of their traffic.
Oh yeah, I saw that. That's crazy.
So
I read the article, I just saw the headline.
Yeah, if Forbes is at risk of losing this much traffic, pretty much everyone is at risk. Like, everyone that's listening to this podcast is at risk, right? And so what I wanted to try to understand is, has that influenced the way you guys value websites? Because it seems like there's a lot more volatility in the market than there was, at least for the sites that mostly rely on Google, right? It's like if you have multiple sources of traffic, etc., it's debatable. But like, as a person that ranks websites every day and that works with people that does that, like, I've seen perfectly fine sites take massive hits in the last 2 years. And to be frank, no SEO has come out and been able to explain it properly, to my knowledge, despite them trying very hard. So I want to understand, do buyers feel the same way, and does that impact the market?
So yes and no, right? So if you look over the span of years of us doing this, and something we've always said is, you got to avoid those critical points of failure in your business. So a critical point of failure is if that one thing fails, you don't have a business anymore. So in your world, that's usually if you lose all your rankings in Google, right? For most of your students is that way, because they only have one traffic source. So while there is all these Google algorithm updates that are happening a lot more recently, it feels like, this was always the same risk. It was, so the valuation there hasn't really changed, and vice versa. For like some Amazon FBA people who think they're safe, well, your whole business is built on Amazon's platform.
Same with
one
Facebook
policy
ads.
change, yeah, same thing. Most of these businesses are solopreneurs with one traffic source, usually one monetization, and these are real critical points of failure. And that is one reason they get lower multiples than, say, if they were a bigger business with diverse traffic, diverse offers, diverse omni-channel marketing, all that kind of stuff, right? So we've always looked at it that way. So as far as we're concerned, it's still relatively the same. I know some SEOs are going to be like, what? But it's so crazy out there now. But like, that's an example of SEOs being too deep into SEO to see like this same factor actually exists in almost every other traffic platform out there.
Yeah, I think the risk is the same. Like the consequences of this happening is the same, but the chances of it happening seem to be quite a bit higher lately. Don't you agree with that? At least on the SEO side.
Yeah, I guess with the recent updates, I think it is a little bit more tumultuous in the SEO world as well. You're seeing other things are happening in, like, say, like Facebook ads, for example. I have a friend, he had pretty good business, decent business, doing pretty well, multiple six-figure business, and he's going to shut the door on that business because how he got all that money was through a specific kind of ads that I'm targeting that became more and more expensive, right? Now that's a different thing than an algorithm. At least you know what's going on, which is nice.
It's not as like overnight
Google
as it
like,
is, yeah.
Yeah, Google was like trying to divine the bone throw. What could this be? So it is a bit weirder in that sense. But from a valuation standpoint, I think buyers still absolutely love SEO.
Okay, so the demand is still similar, basically.
Oh, the demand's huge. I'd say the demand has actually increased.
So yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like, it's not really your job to set the price anyway. It's just a supply and demand game, right? So it's like my main question was like, do people, like, has that impacted demand? And it seems like it's not the case, right?
No, not at all. Like I said, I think demand has actually increased. I think we're seeing a lot more buyers come into our space, and the content model is just a super attractive model, right? So I think that demand's actually going to increase. Yeah, for sure, hands off.
Is that what people are looking for in content sites, like the not too much work and basically return, like decent return on your capital?
I think it depends. Every buyer is different, right? I think if you're a brand new buyer, it's attractive because there's just less moving parts, right? Versus an e-commerce business or a SaaS business for sure. If you're a veteran of the space, especially if you grew up, building niche sites and stuff like that, you just automatically know what to do, right? Like it's a very simple process. Like, oh, this is only as Amazon affiliate offers. I'll throw on display ads. I'll do CRO. You got kind of like an action plan already there. So I think it's an attractive business model whether you're brand new or a veteran, and that gives it the widest buyer pool out there.
Yeah, actually, like, can you give me an idea of like who are the buyers, like kind of like different personas, and maybe like what percentage of the market they represent, so that I get an idea of like what the biggest pool is. And essentially, the underlying question to this is, I'm a content site builder. Who should I target to sell my website?
Just come onto our marketplace, Gil. Or wait.
Well, the thing is, like, the way I build it will attract different people, right? And so that's why I'm kind of asking that.
It does span everywhere. So we have like mainly 6 buyer personas that we use in our own personal marketing, and we have a blog post about it. I can send it to you. And this is pretty much everyone that buys a content site. And similar with e-commerce, these same personas exist in every model. There's the newbie, like I mentioned, we call him newbie norm. Maybe he's looking for job replacement income, stuff like that. If you're trying to sell to someone like that, and it'll be pretty easy to spot if that is who they are, because maybe they don't know terminology, all that kind of stuff. They're asking a lot of like what feels like basic questions. Doesn't mean they don't have money and they don't have the grit to make this acquisition succeed, right? They just don't know yet, so they're still feeling around. If you're trying to sell to someone like that, the best thing you can do is just be super, super supportive. Have really good SOPs, offer maybe instead of a 30-day, a 60-day. So what you're trying to do is make sure the buyer's confident that that you're in it with them a little bit. You're not just gonna like leave once they get the money if something bad happens, right? Then there's the more experienced people, like we call them portfolio Pauls. And these people would be very similar to like what you and Mark are. They have several different sites. They know what they're doing. They're buying sites instead of building them because it's just a faster timeline to make more money quicker, typically, if you know what you're doing. So that's who they are. Very similar to what you and Mark right now. Then there's the flipper Fred, who they go in and just like a real estate person, they're looking to buy something. So they're probably going to buy something below market value, ideally. So if there's nothing wrong with your site, they're probably going to negotiate you pretty hard on price, because just like buying a home, you have to buy below market value, fix it up, and then realize all the profits when you go and sell that business 6 months, 12 months down the road after you're done acquiring it. Then there's some higher level ones, but those are like the three main ones. There's also like strategic Sally. So this would be someone who, like, say they had a jump rope e-commerce business. They buy your health and fitness website because there's synergy, right? Those are the most rare ones, I would say. Definitely the ones that are willing to pay you the most, because the sums of those parts equate, really big revenue for them. So they're usually less like hard on price. They're willing to pay more. Then there's investors, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but they tend to partner with operators, and they're even more hands off. They're really just like the money man, if you will.
What's the biggest part of the market though? Like you mentioned several personas. Like what are like the fast growing segments, and like the segments that maybe like go down or like are a little bit less present?
So newbie norm is for sure the biggest, right? And the reason why that is just because more and more people are coming to our space, so therefore there's more people who are new to our space. So they'll always probably be the biggest demographic. Portfolio Pauls, super common. A lot of portfolio Pauls are starting to become more like the investor Ivans. So they're very similar in their mentality a lot of the times too. Strategic Sally probably always will be the minority of the group, just because the reason I say that is like they're looking for something very, very specific. So the chances of you running into them is usually pretty low. And the chances of them using a broker even is pretty low, because they're looking for something so specific that, they'll have to wait forever unless they ask the broker to go find that business for them, which sometimes does happen.
Okay, I see. Is that like, what is like really hot with buyers right now? Like, what is something that looking? You mentioned the brand earlier, right? Is it the main thing they're looking for? Like what is something that you can't find in most sites on your marketplace, but that most buyers want?
That is a good question. I would say something that would be really attractive to a buyer is if you had an email list and an email list that you actually use. So we get these, and this sounds a bit crazy. I'm sure it will sound crazy to you too, but we have these sellers. They'll build out these email lists on their site because they think it will add value. Yeah, and they never mail them, right? It's like I think I told you before. It's like a gym membership. You never go to the gym though, but we know it's good for you, right? So a good email list that you can prove is monetized, that is adding revenue, that is huge value because that email list, it is a traffic source you own. It is a traffic source you can create new traffic sources with in like lookalike audiences, retargeting, all that good stuff, bringing people back to your content. It's just super valuable and very few content site owners I know do anything with it.
Yes, the people are pretty bad. It's kind of like one of my resolutions this year actually, Zoteria Hacker Pro, is to like push people to do more like this kind of email and return traffic because I think people are getting a little too obsessed with just SEO. It's just, I mentioned that with Matthew Woodward when I did the podcast. It's like people, like it's so much easier to just like add another review to be created by your authors in your project management system and to actually figure out the email marketing stuff. And I don't blame people on the moment, but like, yeah, then they're like literally standing on one leg and Google cuts the traffic, then kind of hurts,
100%, man. Even to the point where like I tell people to go create videos, and I'm trying to create videos on Derwent, but like, and most SEOs, they don't want to create a video, right? And they're like, I don't know anything about this product. I just have writers doing it. Like, well, you can just hire an expert on that product or that niche to do like an unboxing video or whatever, like at least you're getting different types of traffic.
There's services in the US that do that for you, where you order on Amazon and go to their studio. They take photos, videos, etc., send them to you, and then you can use it in your content. Can't remember the name. I'll put it in the show notes. But like we looked at that actually for some of our sites because we're not in the US. Cool. So for us, for example, like doing this kind of stuff is kind of complicated. When we live, I mean, now Mark is in the UK, it's a bit easier. But when we were both in Hungary, it was very difficult. So we're looking at these things, and it's like it's definitely possible. And they have the studios, they have all of that. They do that for e-commerce, but you can do that as an affiliate as well, basically.
I've actually heard of e-commerce people doing that, like for their product listings or whatever. But I hadn't heard of people with content sites doing it, and I think that's a great idea. Like, there's tools out there like I think it's called Capswing, something like that. I'll shoot you the link. But like, there's so many easy tools that you can make cool video with, even if it's a kind of a text-based video. Like just that adds. Like doing that sets you apart from like 99% of affiliate SEOs, right? Like,
it's like the thing is like, that's the question I had Matthew Woodward on the podcast, and the question I asked him, he was like, "Oh, I'm doing this for my sites, etc." I'm like, "Yeah, but does it make financial sense? Can you calculate the return on investment on this extra spending and effort?" And let's be honest for a second, Google does not reward this that much if your main traffic source is Google, right? It's like. Usually it's kind of like a shitty roundup review that ranks number one anyway because the guy just bought more links instead of doing videos. Let's be honest for a second. And I think it's a bit Google's fault if that's not happening as well. If they were rewarding this a bit more, maybe people would try a bit harder,
Yeah, I listened to that episode. I really liked that episode and what Matt had to say there. And he's not wrong. He's totally right. The reason why I brought up the video, though, is to get a different traffic source. So YouTube, Daily Motion. Probably not going to get as much as Google, right?
Probably
Google
not Daily
Motion. Still be your
Motion.
lion's share.
Like, it shows how old you are,
I just thought I would support a non-Google company for once,
Yeah, Instagram TV or something, Snapchat,
yeah,
TikTok
TV, all that stuff. TikTok, yeah.
Here we go.
I just saw a video of a guy who sold like 6 luxury real estate properties with TikTok video. Blew my mind.
To like 14 years old Twitch millionaires.
Yeah, of course, using their mom's credit card, buying the 4-bedroom house of their dreams. But yeah, man, there's a lot of different traffic sources out there, and like I totally agreed with what he had to say about the video not really being worth it. I think the video is worth it if you figure out a process to do it. Like if you're going like all out studio, like production, like maybe that's a bit much. Like it might be okay to have a lower quality video or whatever. It doesn't have to be a Hollywood blockbuster, right? Like I have this DSLR. Hopefully this footage comes out all right, but I have this like crap light like shining on my face, and the camera's on this like box because I just got this camera. I don't have the proper setup. Like just try do stuff, right?
Exactly. And it's funny, we're starting to do videos this year as well, and what I'm realizing is actually it's just better to like output larger volumes of less produced videos. So like these podcasts are a good example. For example, we're just having discussion, creates content. I can like cut it in like small pieces that we put on social media, etc. And I see that I'm reaching more people doing this than like overproducing one big fancy video. And then it's gonna reach people once a year. It's gonna get 3 times the reach, but I'm gonna have like 10 times less videos. So it actually works better that way. But let's go back to the questions about selling your website, please.
Sure. Sorry, tangent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we do that with Mark all the time. One other question I wanted to ask about valuation of, like, let's say I want to sell a website, and it's like Mark and I, we're pretty clean when it comes to like link building, when it comes to the way we build our sites. We try to invest in good content, etc. Let's say that there's literally another site that's against our site that has shitty spam content, that has PBN links, yet ends up ranking the same as us, making the exact same amount of money. How are you going to value these sites differently? Or are you going to value these sites differently, or are you going to just focus on the actual revenue?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if it has PBN links, and there's nothing wrong with PBNs, like I personally don't like them myself, but we sell sites that have PBN links, so
it's not illegal. It's just against Google terms of service.
Yeah,
but
right. I don't like them because I think they're annoying to run and manage. I think it's like actually easier to do white hat at scale. I think PBNs at scale are way more cost prohibitive. But anyways, that's a different point completely. When it comes to actually selling one of these websites, say they did have PBN links, typically they're going to be worth at least 10% less than other sites. Not all the time, but tend to get less value. Also, that's 10% list price. They actually sell often for lower because there's always 2 things you got to balance when selling a business. What the actual sales price is, like what your valuation is, but also how attractive is that business. And if you have a PBN, that makes your business inherently less attractive, especially if a buyer knows what a PBN is, maybe even less attractive if the buyer doesn't know what a PBN is. And you really got to sell through that to build that confidence in the buyer. So it becomes much more difficult to sell, and often you get a lower price because of that. Now, as far as shit content goes, it depends. It's such a subjective thing, right? Like, we definitely have sold sites with very not great content. I don't think they got a high valuation because of that. They probably got a higher valuation because of the cash flow that it's generating. But that is still an awesome buy if you're the buyer and you see like, oh, this content's terrible, I can fix this up and it's going to be converting like gangbusters now, right? Very similar to a UX problem. Like the site isn't necessarily dinged because it has a poor design, but that is a good opportunity for the buyer.
That's a good argument. That basically it is something that you can easily fix and get more value out of the asset you bought, basically.
Yeah.
So would you say that like sites that are like good overall but have one major flow sell easier?
Nah, that's a good question. Again, it depends on the buyer, man. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been hit up by SEOs that are like, they're looking at a site on our marketplace and say it had like declining traffic or declining earnings, and they're like, why would you ever sell this site? No one would ever buy it. Like, well, you wouldn't buy it. I have a lot of other buyers who are very up on SEO that love this site because it has a penalty, right? Because they get to buy it on a discount. So some people love what I call wounded business, very similar to buying a house that needs to be fixed up a bit, right? You have to put in the elbow grease, but that's exactly your criteria. Some buyers just absolutely don't want to have that. They want a business that's already sound, no real flaws, and they'll probably pay a higher price for that business too. So it just kind of depends who you are, what you want.
Okay, fair enough. Actually, that's a good, let's just take an example that people are gonna love even though I hate talking about it. Let's say House Ambition that's been going down a lot, like it doesn't get nearly as much traffic as it used to be. Still, there's like thousands of pages of content. It used to make great money, great history. Let's say I list that on Empire Flippers. How do you value that? Like there's a lot of assets on this, but the monetization is not here because there is, it's just like a lot of pages are not ranking anymore. Would you say, like, how would that be valued?
I mean, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but
What's the
based off what
process?
I know, I know of Health Ambition, you would probably get a lower multiple than what it was in the heyday, right?
course.
Because
Yeah.
it's been year over year decline, right?
100%.
I mean, but it's stabilized now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or is it still declining?
No.
Okay, so it is still declining.
No, it's still stable. It's stable now. It's stable
Okay,
on a
cool,
low,
cool.
but it's stable. Yeah.
Right. So you'd probably be in a good position to at least still get a decent multiple. So that year over year decline, you would have to take into account. You'd also have to take into account that other thing I said about attractiveness. You're just going to have a smaller buyer pool looking at that because they're going to see that traffic and income graph going down. That's going to scare away buyers with certain criteria and leave you with the ones that are the deal hunters, right?
Yep.
So you have a lower valuation, less attractiveness, but overall it's stable, right? So like that doesn't make it an unsellable asset. There's a lot of people out there who would absolutely love to buy it. So we would do the exact same thing we do with the rest of the businesses that go through our evaluation process. We look at the content, look at the backlinks, how long has it been stable, what's its 12-month average, 6-month average, 3-month average, what was this dip about, what was this spike about, that whole vetting process. We would do that with the business. It's just because it is trending down, you would probably get a lower
But would you
lower
put
multiple
any
for it.
bonus on the amount of assets available? Let's say like, despite the fact, let's say like I have that site that has all these stuff, like all this content, even though let's say it has 1,000 pieces of content, but it's performing at the level of a site that has 100 pieces of content. Do I get a bonus for these 900 extra pieces of content, or is it just like, well, sorry, it's not making money, you don't get paid anything for that?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the email argument, right? Like,
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
an email list of 15,000 people that I've never emailed, I've collected over years. This is valuable. Like, well, maybe to someone, there is someone out there that might think all that content is valuable, right?
Yep.
But we got to look at the business as is. So this is where the business is today. It does have all these assets, which might sell the business better, right? Because that buyer will look at that, and that becomes an attractive signal to them to buy this business that is wounded, but it has all this content that they can kind of rework with, right?
Yeah.
So, it wouldn't really affect the valuation, but it could make your business more attractive, which would make it easier to sell.
So basically the plain English answer is no, you don't get any bonus for this. Let's be honest for a second.
Yeah.
So that was just trying to say in a nice way,
You know me, man. I always try to be nice. I don't hurt your feelings like your
Honestly,
1,000 pages of content.
Honestly, I don't care. That site was like a great profit to build for us anyway. Like we've made our profit a long time ago. But I think because I was talking about all these variations in Google, a lot of people are in this situation, right? And they might be considering selling, which is why I'm asking, actually. Another question I wanted to ask, and I know we disagreed about this in the past, so it's going to be an interesting question. So, it's something that I disagreed with Empire Flippers in the past. I'm happy to say that, but I'm sure you guys, we had a lot of discussions about this, but basically, one time we came to you guys with a site that had staff that was well-trained, knew the niche,
I know where you're going.
knew the products, knew all of that, and I spent tens of thousands of dollars hiring and training these people, which are pretty valuable if you want to grow that site, right? And so when we came for the valuation, you guys said, sorry guys, that's a cost. That means your site is actually cheaper now. And I was like, what? And so, like, how do you guys value teams that come with the site? Because I was like, the buyer can just buy it and fire them the next day if he's not happy. And essentially, like, revenue goes up because costs go down, So how is that a fixed cost when you have a complete control over it,
Yeah. So this is also the site where we were talking about growth expenses with content, right? I think
Yeah.
it's the same one.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So this is something that we actually pivoted on after that conversation with you. It honestly is a legacy thing, right? Like, so we come from the background selling like those $14,000, $15,000 sites, and that's just was the easy way to evaluate it. It was right back then for those kind of sites, but you never really had teams back then. So
It was just like
that cost you
shitty
money,
freelance writers.
anything that cost you money was an expense, right? But now we have pivoted pretty not like super hard. Where it's still like it depends on the situation, but we take that into account, right? Like if you have a team, if you have like an acting CEO, a management team that are coming with the business, obviously that's going to add value, right? You're getting talent, thought leadership coming with the team. Now, how much value that is, I can't just say a bumps your multiple by 1 or 2 or whatever, right? It just depends on a lot of things. But as far as like growth investments, training a team, content, all that kind of stuff, we pivoted pretty hard on that. So I'm basically in agreement with you nowadays. Right. That was a lesson learned.
Okay.
Damn, this is supposed to be more controversial.
Yeah, I mean, it's your fault. You agreed, like you were supposed to disagree and slam the table and just
walk off. Being so persuasive, Gail.
Yeah, it's the one thing where I disagreed with you guys. Like in the past, I think it was like around a year and a half ago, something like that.
I think so. Yeah. And you were right. And like I said, it was a legacy thing. It was a great learning lesson from us. And I actually think, I don't have any analytical numbers on this. It's just a gut thing. I actually think because of that change, we've gotten a lot more really high quality businesses on our marketplace, which, go figure, right? Like,
nice.
Makes obvious sense why you would.
I mean, I guess, like, especially these institutional buyers, they're like, they don't want to hire. They don't want to spend time doing that. It's especially if your staff knows the products you're talking about, knows all of that, etc. Like, this stuff I'm talking about, we're literally buying them the products. They were using them all day and they like had access to it, etc. And I was like, but I understand where you came from because I've also built these terrible affiliate sites in the past, and I know how I used to build them, and I understand how, that was just a cost, and you would just hire another writer the next week, and it would just be the same, and essentially, so I get it, but like it's nice to see the market evolve that way, and I think that also goes in the path of what we talked earlier about, like the business progressing and becoming more and more professional. So this is cool. What is one thing that I can do before selling my site that is easy to do? Let's say I want to sell my site in 3 weeks. I want to list it in 3 weeks. I have 3 weeks in front of me. How can I sell my site for more money? What can I do?
That's a little bit too short of a time frame. I probably wouldn't recommend you doing really anything if it's only 3 weeks. Because the last thing you want to do, right, is you do some big thing like, this is going to increase my multiple. And it's just like, one, it could tank the business, right? Like, oh shit, I guess I'm not selling in 3 weeks now. But the other thing too is like, the way the business is valued, if you want the best multiple possible is based off a 12-month average, right? So at 3 weeks, you're not even getting a month bump to average.
3 months.
So I would recommend that. 3 months, okay. 3 months, I would actually do this at 6 months, by the way. Not to be too nitpicky.
All right, let's just cut 6 months.
At 6 months, I would look at doing, all the CRO, all the on-page stuff. If you have an email list, try to optimize that. Basically, I would do what a buyer does, which they come in, they ask what is the low-hanging fruit that I can do in week 1, week 2, etc. to up this revenue, right? I would do that exact same thing. Pretend as if you just bought the site and you want to make those quick gains. Because 6 months, that's a good chunk of time where CRO or adding the display ads can boost the income enough to where it gives you a significant increase in your final list price. Even if you have the same multiple, it would be a significant boost because of the increased revenue.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yes. Things like 6 months, I hang out in these events. I know 6 months is like, people don't know what they're going to eat tomorrow, right? And it's like 6 months is a long commitment for a lot of people in this industry. That's why I was asking 3 weeks.
We're getting old, Gail. Yesterday was actually 6 months ago in our mind.
Yeah, it's just our brain's slowing down, I think. I wanted to ask, why should I hire a broker to sell my site? Like, why can't let's say, why can't I go on SEO Signal Labs and make a post there that I'm selling my affiliate site instead of talking to you guys or any other broker for that matter?
Well, that depends. If you post a good meme in the SEO Signals Lab, it won't be taken down. Stephen King will, look out for that. That's how he approves those ads. But no, it's a good question, man. I get a lot of people say, mainly people are like really, really negative on Reddit. People were like, brokers, they just like email their list and that's all they do. Like, well, that's clearly not all we do, right? And I think a lot of the times they undervalue that email list. But there are certain cases where you should go private, right?
Okay.
So if you already have someone reaching out to you, maybe you already have an audience, like you and Mark have an audience, right? I think it was, who was it? I don't want to mix the names. Income School. there's another income we'll probably talk about later, but Income School, they just sold a bunch of their websites from their own platform. I think they sold it mainly to their students. Now they have a platform, they have an audience. It's relatively easy for them to do that. It's already built. Most people don't have that, right?
Which is why I didn't want to take the example of us, because we could do the same with our email list.
Right.
But like, you know,
yeah, so with those groups, you can go ahead and do that too in those groups and, you know, save the commission or whatever, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, right? If you are brand new, I would always advise using a broker just because you don't know what you don't know, and the broker is going to help make sure that you're safe. Now, if you are very busy, you're a high productive person, then the broker can also make sense too. One, the broker tends to give you a higher valuation than what you're going to get privately, even when you factor in the commission. That tends to hold true. You know, I've had a friend, he sold a site for $400,000. He's like, I would have went with you guys, but I didn't want to pay the commission. He told me about the business. Like, man, this would have been like a $650,000 business on our marketplace, and I know you would have gotten a seller. It's a very, very good business. So that's one thing. If you go private, you tend to get a lower sales price, even when you factor in the commission. Also, you don't get the leverage an actual sales team. So most SEOs, I mean, me included, I'm not really big into selling people on anything, right? I'm not a fan of it, all that kind of stuff. But we actually have a trained sales team that sells these businesses all the time, and they approach it in a consultative approach, right? So you get to leverage that whole sales team, you get to leverage a vetting team, and you get to leverage our technical team on the migration department when you do actually sell that business to help mitigate and mediate if anything goes wrong during literally the most important but most annoying section of the sales process where you're actually handing the business over, right? So if you have if you don't have a lot of time, you're building a lot of stuff, then using us is just like using another agency, right? Like, hey, I don't have enough time to write this content. I'm hiring this agency to go do it for me. Even though it's an added cost, I could have written it for free. It makes sense. I'm making a good use of my time. So that's the value add of the broker, in addition to all the other stuff, like getting their network of buyers and process, all this stuff. You get to leverage their team.
Yeah, I think the legal aspect people kind of ignore because they assume everything's going to go well. But I think I've seen some private sales not go so well, and it's
oh man, yeah, it's scary.
It's probably nice to have someone you can fall back to and that has done that before that you can talk to. I think it's like a little bit reassuring. And literally, some friends in Budapest tried to sell their site the first time without a broker, and it literally got cancelled last minute, and they already had transferred the domain, but not the hosting, and it was a mess. And
yeah, man, it's scary when you do it. If you don't know what you're doing, and it's your first time, like, look, selling a business is like or buying a business for that matter, it's a highlight event. You're not doing it every single day of the week. Yeah. What you're doing with the other stuff. So if it's your first time, I almost say it's worth just the training you get by using a broker. And, then maybe you go and do a private next time.
I can see
whatever,
that. Yeah, do it once to just see how it
right?
works. At least, and then after that, it's a choice. After that, right? Is it worth it or not?
Yeah.
How much do you guys charge for that?
Yeah, so we're based on a tiered system. So if it's less than $1 million, we charge 15%, which is pretty common. I think most of the other big brokers charge around that. $1 million to $2 million, we charge 12%. 2 to 5 million is 10, and anything over $5 million, 8%.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of funny because like $1 million, I guess you do the same work, but the price must vary a lot actually.
Well, it's funny, dude. Like, so it's actually, in my opinion, harder to sell a $4 million business than it is to sell a $15 million business because one, like everything is pretty much the same. Like the work you need to do, very similar to like lending money. It's the same amount of work for the most part. Only the $15 million deal probably has better books, better everything, more streetlights. So it's
a real company, basically.
Yeah, right.
Like a real company versus some dude that got like that is pretty organized, but like still probably messy in his accounting and so.
Right. But when you get to that level, also financing opens up. All sorts of different ways you can acquire businesses with private money opens up. That doesn't exist as much in our space. It's starting to, but just not as much. But yeah. Okay,
cool. That makes sense. Now I wanted to talk more about a personal case, but I'm sure it actually is the case of a lot of people that are going to be listening to this podcast. So our profile with Mark and I. We're good at growing sites from scratch. We've always started sites from scratch. do you think we should keep doing that, i.e. buy $10 domains and start and build them up and or sell them / keep them? Or should we start buying sites? Like, according to all the people you've met, the experiences, all of that, since you guys are like in that marketplace, you see the people that do the opposite. Like, what are they doing? What do you think makes more sense, etc., based on your experience?
Yeah, so I have two answers to that. One, I think as long as you keep running Authority Hacker, I think it's just good business for you to always be starting new sites, just to keep showing people that you do what you say you do and it works, right? So there's that part of it. If you want to go faster, I would say you should look at buying. So if you're in a good place money-wise, because you're going to speed up the timeline. Like, I don't know what your average site is, but I usually tell people if you're starting a brand new site, and especially if you're new, you're probably not going to really be making anything significant till like month 15. And even then, maybe it's only like $200, $500.
The first year is never very glorious,
Yeah, exactly. And so you get to skip that entire timeline by buying. And you get to do a lot of all those low-hanging fruit stuff that I just told you about, like adding display ads, CRO, etc. So you get to level up quicker. It has more authority, higher DR, all that kind of stuff. So you can order more content, do all the on-page. You just have a lot more levers to play with, and that's the big reason why so many people come in and buy businesses. Like, we have a lot of friends that they've sold with us, right? They sold on our marketplace, and now they're our buyers. And that's a very common story on Empire Flippers is you sell 3 or 4 businesses, then you start buying these smaller businesses, do all those quick wins, you flip, you keep one, you grow that and scale it.
How big is that population? Like, how many, like, don't give me an exact number, but like, is this like a few
53.
dozen people? Is that a few dozen people, or is that like hundreds of people doing that? Like, is that a real movement, or is that like kind of like a little pocket of the market?
The flippers?
The people that like started selling sites first, and now they've changed to essentially becoming buyers and like work on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I don't know if I feel confident to put a percentage on it, but it's fairly significant, at least at the high end. So it's significant for in the range of people who are buying businesses between 500,000 to even up to 4 million, because that's the range. That within that range, there's a bunch of buyers competing for a business, and those buyers originally got their capital by selling businesses with us. So it's becoming more and more common. And again, it goes back to what I just said. They understand, like, they get to buy time. They get to speed up the timeline by 12 to 16 months by buying this business. And if they buy a wounded one that they know how to fix, like a Google penalty, bad design, like, it makes sense. Unless you're like married to some niche idea. As long as you're niche agnostic, it makes a lot of sense, I think.
Niche agnostic. That's for Mark's podcast. But
forget the copyright.
I think we need to start a book, like write a book about being niche agnostic. But like, I think it's interesting.
Write the forward poem.
Go for it. I think it's quite interesting, especially buying these sites that went down, because essentially, based on what you told me, you're buying them like based on the variation of the law without any kind of upside for the extra content, etc. So worst case, if you don't fix them, it's basically the same as buying a successful site, right? In terms of like ROI. But like, if you actually manage to like lift them back up and like get all of this stuff back, then the upside is massive, right? Isn't that what a lot of people are playing right now?
Yeah, man. It's a huge ROI. Obviously it's risky, right? I never want to come on a podcast and say buying a business isn't.
Because when you buy it at the low price, let's say you buy it, let's say that site used to make, I'm going to take a random number, 50 grand, and now it's at 5 grand. Like, I buy it valued based on like it's making 5 grand a month, which is exactly the same as a site that just went from 0 to 5 grand, right? Essentially, I'm paying the same price here, except that other site has like way more content, backlinks and all of that from before it got hit. It's like, even if it never goes back up, I'm essentially making the same money, right?
I guess I should reframe what I meant. I meant it's risky as in like online business is risky as a whole, right? So I never want to tell someone like you're just going to buy this business that was making 50K, now it's making 5K, and everything is going to be gravy, right? Like that 5K could go away, right? You could be down to zero. So that's the thing I meant by risky. But in general, as an investor, I think that is a great way to do it, because if that site did go down, right, it obviously has the potential to go up. It's in its records, it's historical records, right? As long as it's not like a fad, like a fidget spinner or something that maybe won't ever come back to like 30 years or something.
My fidget spinner sites. You're hurting my emotions right now.
Best red fidget spinners dot spin. But yeah, you're exactly right. I think there's just great value adds. When it comes to buying digital assets, if you look at other assets, like I know you just bought like an apartment in Budapest, right? Mm-hmm. Like say you were buying that as an investment, right? You would look to like $100,000 property in America, whatever. 1% rule, want to make $1,000 a month, and out of that $1,000 for rent, you're making like $500 maybe once everything is said and done, maybe $400 when you count repairs, right? $100,000 in a digital asset like a content site, you're making like $4,000-$6,000 a month, right? Like it's crazy. It's riskier. It's riskier than real estate.
It's like there's that notion of time in real estate versus websites. I mean, like how many websites that were started 10 years ago are ranking on Google today?
Right. Just Google.
So exactly. So while I agree, I also think that if you look at the lifetime of an investment in real estate versus a lifetime investment in a website, it's not that far, to be honest. It's just much slower. The thing is, like, if you can make your money fast and reinvest it in something more long-term, like take 50% of the upside, invest in something like real estate or like stocks or something, and put the rest back in websites, that's when you get rich from this.
So the way I always tell people, digital assets is the risky one, right? You can invest in it, and unlike real estate and stocks, there is a real opportunity to double or triple the investment, which I think is like within a year. You can triple that within a year if you're really, really good. If you try to do the same thing in stocks and real estate, I would say that's actually riskier in some aspects because of the things you have to do to triple it in those industries. But you're exactly right. I think most good entrepreneurs should have this like diversification thing. If they buy a digital asset, make it go good, flip it, they should put some money aside, one, to pay themselves, but also into other investments that are unrelated to Google and hopefully unrelated to Facebook and unrelated to Amazon, right?
Maybe we should, on top of the philosophy podcast, we should start the personal finance podcast with Mark. It's probably like it's a niche I'd love to get in, but like as myself, like same as what we do for Tori Hacker. It's something that we've talked about with Mark, actually. Again, getting off topic here.
I can introduce you to some of the Choose FI guys. We have a few of them as buyers of ours, and for the same thing, they see the fast growth that they can have, obviously risk and all that stuff. But I bet you and Mark would do good in that niche.
Yeah, I think maybe one day.
I'll come on your podcast on financial freedom when you start.
Maybe we'll do that one day from our private island in the Bahamas or something.
Perfect setting.
Okay, there's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. It's kind of like a third part of this podcast, which is all the kind of like new business models that are coming up with like website acquisition. So like for a long time, it was like a few operators, like you guys were some of the biggest. There was like FEI, there was a few others that were just like site brokers. But now we're seeing a lot of money come into buying websites. Like this wasn't as hot of a market 5 years ago as it is today by a long shot. Even though I don't have the numbers, I can see, like I just see it. And so together with that influx of money, a lot of like kind of like alternative business models, I'm gonna say, have popped up where there's like people that like operate your site for you, will take a percentage of equity. There is like people that actually will build the sites for you. There is people that will buy the sites for you. There is all of that happening. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. So let's go through a few of them. And kind of like I want to see how you guys interact with them and like where you see them going. So the first one I want to talk about is site operators. So essentially there's a lot of people who buy websites, but they're newbies, they don't have the skills to run these things, or they don't have the time to run these things, and they're looking for someone to essentially take that burden on themselves, and they're willing to give them either some equity, a percentage of revenue, or sometimes just typical agency model, I guess, like a fee or something. So I was thinking of like, I think on Folio, like Dumwells does that pretty much. There's like these guys at Alpha Investors as well. Like that's the two I mentioned, but there's plenty of them. And when I went to the conferences, a lot of people who have agencies especially are very much looking forward to transitioning to becoming site operators for investors. So you've probably seen people take over sites that you've sold. How does that go usually?
Yeah, so I'm actually speaking at a conference in Australia here in a week. Two agency owners about how they can do this with their team that they have built, because they have some unique advantages of already having a team of professionals. But as far as like what Dom's doing on Folio, that kind of setup where there is someone coming in giving you money to run this business is actually something that is not new at all. If you look into private equity, it's new in our space. But if you look into private equity, how it works, there's a thing called a search fund. So what a search fund is. It started, I believe, in Stanford, but basically it's like this ambitious MBA student who doesn't want to work for someone, doesn't want to work for PE or whatever. He wants to become his own entrepreneur, right? So what he does is he engages with the private equity firm to create a search fund. They pay him like 60 grand a year to go find a business, usually in the $5 to $20 million range, that he then buys using their money. So the PE gets the deal because he finds the deal for them. They pay him very little in PE terms to go find a deal. And then they deploy the capital. And now they got this ambitious guy that they vetted already who has good credentials to run that business for them. So it's like a win-win, right? So what Dom's doing with Onfolio is like a mutated version of that, basically. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing private equity coming in. They're basically funding these entities. So in this case, Onfolio, but there's another entity that has bought about $15 million from us over the last, 12, 13 months now. Wow. And they're the exact same thing. They raise all this money from PE into their equity because traditional PE doesn't really look at our space because they're looking for things with transferable management, right? Which none of these businesses typically have. Maybe they have a VA or something like that, right? But no real thought leadership happening. So how it works out is instead of a search fund where they're buying one business, it's a fund that's buying several businesses and rolling them up into a portfolio underneath one management of that portfolio. So that's kind of how it works. Now it is relatively new in our space. I'd say in the last 2 years, it was really starting to take off. And I think last year in particular in the SEO space, like we had seen this in the FBA space already, but last year I think it's really taken off in the SEO space.
Yeah, I see that too. It's like basically sites change hands and then there's these kind of like operators. I think it's a massive opportunity if you have an agency and you don't like clients.
Yes.
Here's my thing. There's a lot of people that are going to listen to this that have an agency and that just like got off the call with an annoying client and they're tired of that. Yeah. Well, the good news is these investors, they don't really want to talk to you. They just want you.
They just want the money, right?
They just want you to run the website and they look at it once or twice a year and then they just like essentially keep you accountable, but like you don't really have to explain what you're doing too much as long as the website is doing well. Which personally at the time when I had an agency, I would have liked a lot better. And I might not have started authority sites if I had this opportunity, actually. But like, do you see like I'm sure you've seen several of these operators. Like, do you think they do a good job overall? Like, you don't have to give names. Like, I'm not talking about dumb wells, by the way. At this point, I'm talking about operators in general.
Mark Webster, he's a terrible operator, Gail. Don't get in a partnership with him.
I agree. He's letting me do all the work. He's in Bali right now, like sipping cocktails, and I'm like stuck with you.
So you're coming to visit me in Vietnam? Terrible friend. Wait, hit him up on Facebook after this. But to answer your question, man, like a lot of the answers I've given you today, it just depends, right?
Uh-huh.
It depends on who the operator is. One thing I tell investors, if they're like investor IBAN coming to our marketplace, which sometimes we do connect like a person who's moneyed up with an operator, and that's something we want to actually develop down the road into like a real system or whatever. But what I often tell investors who are looking for an operator is if you're talking to an entrepreneur, like say a guy in Chiang Mai, he's doing the digital nomad life in Chiang Mai, he's built up a content site, maybe he sold that site for $200K, right? Pretty awesome, probably a life-changing experience for him. Now that site was probably making between, 10, 20K a month, like somewhere in that range, right? It is not that crazy of a difference to run a business that's making 50 to 70K a month in the same business model as what they were doing. So I tell investors, look for that kind of track record, who has gone up, because usually they haven't been able to scale up to that bigger site because they just don't have the capital to scale. So that's where the investor comes in and helps that operator.
Is this or they like the HR skills usually? They like the hiring ability and outsourcing ability, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. You see this in e-commerce, by the way, all the time because that's such a capital-intensive business. Like, I've known FBA people that have grown their business to $1 million business, and they have like almost nothing in the bank account because there was all the credit cards as they're like trying to scale up, get that next break on economy of scale. So people who are like PE level money or high net worth individuals, they can come in there and swoop in on those kind of deals because they know they can scale where that seller couldn't, and they just immediately increase the margin.
So do you think that's a good career opportunity for people who don't necessarily have the capital right now but want to be more involved in sites and don't necessarily want to do clients, etc.? Let's say you have some success, like should you be trying to be an operator?
There's a good question. Again, it depends, right? Do you want to be beholden to someone else? Because there's probably going to be some kind of rules involved with that money, right? They're not just going to give it to you and say you can do anything you want.
Really?
You got to have a business plan, right? Well, maybe some of them will. It depends how moneyed up they are, how much they care about a return, right? Maybe they don't care. And that would be like, if that's the case, yes, do that. If they don't care, definitely do that. But yeah, it depends, right? Like, do you want to scale into something that's huge? Do you want a lifestyle business? If you're more of a lifestyle person, I'd say that's probably not a good move for you. Just from like, probably a good move for your bank account. Probably not a good move for the other parts of life that matter, which I think a lot of digital entrepreneurs specifically forget about. Like, there's other things. Like, maybe turn off the laptop and play some Red Dead Redemption. Enjoy yourself.
That's life.
But yeah, the opportunity though is there. Right now there is so much money in the space and so much more money coming in. As long as we don't have a recession or anything like that, which may happen in the next year, it's a pretty long bullish market, right? As long as that doesn't happen though, I see more and more big money coming into the space that will be looking for people just like your listeners to partner with on these kind of sites, and they will give you the money to go and acquire these businesses, right? Mm-hmm. Just if you do enter into that kind of partnership, make sure you get legal counsel to look over the contract. Don't put yourself in any kind of liability. Make sure it's all above the board and you really understand what you're doing and what they want from you, the money people, and make sure everything's very clear before you go into it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is like, it's probably something that if you're really ambitious in this market, but you haven't had the opportunity to work on bigger sites, it's a really good opportunity to learn fast, maybe faster than you would on your own.
For sure.
Do that for 3 to 5 years. And then with that experience and probably the money you've made doing that, then maybe transition to your own stuff, I think there is an opportunity for the younger people who listen to this podcast, etc. right now, if you have had some success with that. And so it's when I see someone starting an SEO agency in 2020, I'm like, man, you're 10 years late,
Why are you starting a Facebook ad agency? Damn.
It's you know what I mean? It's just it's so saturated at this point. And I think that's essentially the new SEO agency, which means there will be a lot of really bad actors in this market as people understand that.
Yes. Yes.
But I do think that is, if you're gonna do quote unquote client work, the high opportunity sub-market right now when I see the level of investment there is in websites. And I kind of wanted to get your feel on that, but it seems like you agree with that.
One thing on the agency thing, if you do have an agency, say, you have people working for you, they're serving clients and all that stuff, what I tell an agency owner to do, instead of going out and finding, these PE people or high net worth individual person, is you can go ahead and, start your own site. You can build it from scratch or buy it, whatever that you want. And you should treat that asset as if it is your client, just mentally, and even in your agency books, that asset pays your agency X amount of money to do whatever. And one thing you can do over time as you grow and build these assets, it's kind of like the flywheel theory in marketing, but the asset's at the center instead of the customer. And what ends up happening is that asset starts pulling off so much cash, then you sell that asset, you can go buy more assets, and eventually your account manager that you would have in a normal agency that serves this client, becomes the asset manager, right? And maybe that person even becomes your CEO of this portfolio of brands for you, and you have multiple AMs that become CEOs over time. And that's one way to do it without having to be beholden to private money or whatever, if you don't want to go that route. And it's a good way to start, just to see if your agency can do it, right? Like before you take on the money. So.
I think it's also easier to sign up clients when you can show a site in a niche that's doing well. Like if you're like that competitor, like you can sign people up really easily. So I usually tell people to pick a niche and just build a site, and then after that just outreach for clients. But again, out of topic. In France, like when you write papers and they just like this like out of topic thing, they just like scratch the whole thing when you write a dissertation. Well, that's what we're doing right now. That was my education.
To make the most frustratingly all over the place episode for you, Gail.
Oh no, we've done worse with Matthew, I think, but it's okay.
Oh, good. Second best.
The other thing I want to talk about is investment funds, actually. So I know there's been a lot of kind of like trials and failures with this model from a lot of people. And like, I mean, I'm thinking about Income Store right now that has literally been labeled as like a pyramid scheme and everything, and literally closed shop. And I have no idea where people's money is. I haven't invested in that. But that doesn't look very good right now. I know Wired Investors is not essentially like a very glorious story as well. From the past, like they did everything above board. It's just they struggled with operations, I think. I still see more of these popping up, like these kind of like, well, just put your money in and we'll take care of everything, and you don't have to think about anything, and you get 20% return on your capital per year, and then we'll just take the rest as operators, basically. What's your take on this business model that's popping up more and more?
Oh man, this is a very loaded question. There's so much to discuss.
Maybe we should do a second episode.
We're more than open to it. As long as I can, beat Kevin Espirito share being on this podcast as many times as possible. But yeah. So first, let's talk about Income Store. I almost said Income School. I keep doing that. They're totally two different
They're gonna be happy. Income School's gonna be very happy.
Yeah, they must be loving this. But yeah, so Income Store. Very different than the other ones you mentioned, right? I think there's a bunch of red flags there. Even before this stuff broke out, like anyone that promises you a guarantee, which I think their guarantee was like 15% guarantee, like that is not right. Like even if they're being genuine about it, they're not trying to fleece you. They're like being real. They're giving you that guarantee because they truly believe in what they're doing. That just means they aren't very good at business. Don't do it. So they're either scamming you or they're really naive, and both of them.
I like this line. You're either stupid or like cynical. That's usually one of the two.
Right. But yeah, so like those kind of guarantees is just you should run away. That's a red flag. I unfortunately have a friend who did invest in them, a very low amount for him. It was about 50K, and I think it might have been even a little bit less than 50K, but he actually got about 25K of it back. But the site was never making more than like $200-300 a month, and now of course he's lost the other 25K or so because of this whole debacle. So again, I would say if you are going to invest in something, you should at least have a modicum understanding of what it is you're investing in, right? Mm-hmm. Like you don't have to understand everything completely, but you should get the gist. And I feel like a lot of the investors, especially in I almost said Income Store, a lot of the investors in Income Store don't know anything about internet marketing. Mm-hmm. Like the way, from what I understand, the way he raised a lot of that money, it was like rallies, kind of like rah-rah events, like radio ads, people who are like a plumber, and nothing against plumbers. I used to be an oilfield roughneck, but the average plumber, just like the average oilfield roughneck, like doesn't know anything about content sites. Exactly.
Like selling
exactly
these shitty penny stocks with like high commission.
Yeah. So that's the thing with the Income Store. If anyone promises you a guarantee, that should be such a hard red flag that you don't go you'd never go into business with them, hopefully. Now I understand people will get caught up in that because it's a very sexy sales pitch, right? It's just like not good. Usually going for the boring pitch, the guy who tells you we might lose everything, but you should give me 300K. Usually that guy is going to be better to trust than the other guy. Okay. Because at least he's being honest, right? He's like, we might lose everything. That's reality, right? You might lose the investment. So moving on to the next one with like wired investors and all that stuff. So that model can actually work. For example, much less complex debt raising than what Wire did, but the company that bought $15 million from us, they basically raised capital from Series A, Series B, or Series C or whatever. All that stuff is pretty similar to what Wire Investor was attempting to do and trying to do, and it did partially do. What I have seen personally in the space is the more sizzle that these funds have, usually the worse they are. So the $15 million one, as an example, like some of these ones, they have like great press, great marketing funnels, all this stuff, and they're like, wow, these guys are really going places. Like we had one guy who's like, I'm going, like I think his goal is to buy like over 100 businesses, and he ended up buying like 3, but he got a lot of press. Versus this other guy, this other company bought 15 million from us. Their old website basically used to just say, like, their homepage of their website was, if you don't know who we are, you should probably leave this website. There's no call to action. Like they're very boring, but they're the most successful model of this that I've seen so far in the space. So it can for sure work, and I think more will work. Like I think Dom seems to be having some good success with Onfolio. I think there's going to be a lot more people out there doing very similar things, and I think they will see success. But like anything else, there's going to be more people who experience failure as well.
I agree. I think it's still a very young market, and with that, there's going to be a lot of failed attempts basically. And
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's interesting, but at the same time, I mean, it's like, honestly, if there was like someone that was an amazing operator, I'd love to invest money, because like I could vet the sites like really quickly, and I'd be like, okay, here's some money, etc. I just don't have time, and it'd be very easy for me as an investor to like invest in what I believe would be the better sites. But I haven't found someone that I'm like trusting enough with that at this point, basically.
Yeah.
So.
It can be difficult. And another thing on this, on the really successful ones I was talking about, like they have like departments, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just like a solopreneur. Like they have a guy that all he does is due diligence. Like he doesn't even talk to the seller. He does the due diligence. Maybe he'll talk with the seller. Then they bring in the negotiator to actually close the deal, right? Mm-hmm. And then they have lawyers. Then they have an actual brand operator for those brands that they buy that had nothing to do with the actual buying process, right? So they have a whole system in place. It's not just like one operator and here you go. They have a very good system in place.
Can you give their names or not really?
I don't know, actually.
Okay. All right,
so I'm going to veer on no.
all right, fair enough. Like Justin's going to be mad at you a little bit.
No, that's not the reason. I don't know if they want me to talk about it.
So
they're pretty like close to the chest most of the time.
Fair enough. We can respect that. If you were an independent site builder, you get fired by Empire Flippers tomorrow.
Because of this podcast.
Because of you revealed
Justin, why?
You revealed these guys. Let's imagine you just changed the course of time 15 seconds ago, said their names, and you get fired. You know a little bit about building websites. Do you start your own sites and essentially do that, or B, try to become an operator, or C, try to start an agency, or D, anything else? The last one I had on this one was like fly to Vegas and put all your money on red. So there is that option as well.
Macau is way closer, man. I'll go to Macau. It's a good question. I was in the SEO Blueprint group with Glenn Alsop, and I did an AMA for them, and they asked me what I would do if I was starting from scratch. And I think it's pretty similar to the same answer I'll give you, with like one modification at the end. I would definitely start a content site. Now, if I was low on money, whatever, because of the situation, I would probably start an agency first, probably a Facebook ad agency, just because it's easy and quick. I think I could get that out to 10K very fast, and then I'm good in terms of money, and I would start putting my resources into building something with better leverage, which would be a content site. So I'd start off as your typical stage 1 site, or buy one if I could, if I have the money to speed everything up. And then I would look at building a real community, probably a paid Facebook group, like a recurring membership on a Facebook group, lead magnets, the whole 9 yards. I'd create a gigantic autoresponder that probably went out for like 2 years or something like that. That would all going to all my different reviews, all my other articles, building a real community, not just focused on SEO. And if that email funnel goes good, I would also run paid traffic towards my lead magnet, which would be filled with my affiliate links and subscription group, all that kind of stuff. I basically try to go and make a really big, solid media company that eventually I could sell my own products on as well. The one modification here that I would add is I probably would go to these high net worth individuals because I know them, right? Like I know these people, I can probably raise some of this money. I know a lot of talent in our circles as well. So I'm already kind of like a natural bridge. So that's probably what I would do. I would be the bridge between the high net worth guys, the private equity guys that are looking into Main Street, where we're at, and like the digital nomads who are really talented, lifestyle driven, all that stuff. And I'd be the bridge between the two. So that's probably what I would do.
Actually.
But
maybe you can open an office for these guys where like like a really cool one with a pool and like, all that stuff. And then
I got the villas. I do it
the fancy villas where like the digital nomads can live in, funded by investors, where they run the websites from. What do you think about that?
I gotta add one more thing. I would only do this after I tried to apply to work with you and Mark, and you guys rejected me. Then I would go do what I just said earlier.
Okay.
But yeah, having a pool and an office, it sounds cool, man.
All right. So if someone wants to start this one, or wants to get Greg fired, whichever comes first.
Please don't do that. I love my job.
All right.
Just don't fire me, please.
My last question is going to go back to selling your site, because that was kind of like the main point of this podcast, is what's the one thing you see most people do wrong when they sell their website that listeners can take and do a better job at?
Being too emotional, to be honest. Most sellers are first-time sellers, just like most buyers are first-time buyers often. And what ends up happening is if you are a first-time seller, it's often the first business you ever built, so you have an emotional equity in the business that is not reality equity, right? Like the business is worth a lot more to you than it's actually worth sometimes, and it's good to set that aside. Now, the other thing I would say is if you're going into selling a business, to two other things is realize that before you enter in negotiations, you got your valuation, you should have a minimum price threshold. So if you got a valuation for, I don't know, $500,000, ask yourself, what is the minimum you'd be willing to take where you'd walk away happy? Maybe that's $450 or $460, right? And the reason why I say that is because when you get in the heat of negotiations, especially if you're dealing with a savvy buyer, they might tuck you down below that threshold if you never set aside that time to really put your foot down on where your minimum is. It's very easy to get, especially if you're not using a broker that doesn't have like a business analyst there helping you. It's easy for that negotiations to maybe overpower you if you don't know what you're doing. So have that minimum price threshold. And the last thing is when you are negotiating, price isn't always the thing you have to negotiate on. You can sometimes build up, like say someone, like a $500,000 business, someone offered you $400,000 with a $100,000 earn out, and you want more money up front, come down on that price a bit. Be flexible. If your minimum price threshold is $450, say, hey, give me $460, and they're like, well, I can come up to $440. Like, you know what, $450, done. And he's like, okay. And now you get $450 up front, right? So if you want more money up front, sometimes it's worth it to have that flexibility. If you want more money overall, sometimes you have to be more flexible on the earnout. But overall, always approach negotiations as a collaboration instead of a showdown. There's so many sellers and buyers who make this mistake, like, no, I want this, like, no, this, like, and you're like, guys, let's be more collaborative.
In the discussion.
Yeah, it's a high tension process, right? Whether it's your first one or fifth one or whatever, there's always obstacles and challenges to overcome, and it can be high stress. So just approach it with a collaborative nature. Try to find out what the buyer's problems are, and you'll probably be able to solve that problem with your business and be able to sell for a higher price.
Okay, well, I think we're done with this podcast. Any last words of wisdom, and/or where can people find you online?
So if someone wanted to reach out to me, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. It's just Greg at empireflippers.com. It's just hold one of my business cards on the mountain in the Himalayas. Like, I will fly to you.
There is a projector with your business card like Batman,
Yeah. We need the director of marketing here now.
All right, let's go back. So Greg at empireflippers.com, right?
Yes, Greg at empireflippers.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. Pretty easy to get a hold of. If you send me a message on Facebook, it's just facebook.com/GregoryTheWriter, and add me. We can become friends on there. I apologize for all my bad poetry and stories, but I use that as a place to dump a bunch of my fiction. But I've also just started recently using LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
LinkedIn is actually more active than I thought. I started looking at it again, and I'm like, oh, actually, people will hang out there and like click on stuff and everything. Actually, so.
Oh, I'm having so much fun trolling all these business thought leaders. It's great fun on there.
That's the next podcast we do together. How to troll business.
Perfect.
Anyway, let's close it here. Thank you for listening. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week for another episode. Bye, Greg.
See you, man.
Alright, that's it for this week's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed Greg. I think he was quite truthful and not trying to give us a lot of corporate bullshit. At some point I caught him, but overall it was pretty good and I quite enjoyed this interview. And if you did as well, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumb up. See you next week for another episode. Bye.